We'll chat Easter with Andy, Guy, and Joe.
Hey, welcome to episode 3, Good Friday today. It's good to have you with us.
Yeah, we covered Maundy Thursday yesterday. Pretty powerful image that Jesus gives a new command, right? A new command to put on the slave outfit and serve one another in doing the dirty tasks for each other.
Yeah, I think there's this really phenomenal imagery of him taking off his regular clothes and switching it out for the clothes of basically a slave.
And we talked a wee bit about how it was like Jacinda Ardern becoming even lower than like the lowest job in New Zealand.
Yeah, like the rubbish, like even lower than a rubbish collector. Because
Yeah,
at least
sure.
they're still getting wages, right?
Totally,
They're
they're still getting paid for it.
This was just lower than low.
This was awful.
And I think it was all about this sense of like, what I'm doing to you, you will do unto others, right?
Yeah, so the image or the command, which is what that Maundy word stands for, was to go and do as I've done to you to others, right? So we start to become the slaves for all those and serve those, and yeah, wow.
So good. Hey, so welcome to episode 3, Good Friday. We really hope you enjoy it. Sit down, gather others. Let's dig through Good Friday together with Joe. Good to have you with us. Cheers. Hey, kia ora, Joe. Welcome back. Today is Good Friday, but there's a piece of me that feels like this is not going to be good.
Yeah, it's probably a fair assessment, my friend.
I mean, so punters have been on this journey with us, Palm Sunday, Maundy Thursday, and now we're heading into Good Friday.
Some would say the pinnacle of the Easter story, but I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like some people hit the peak here, and I feel like this is not where we should hit the peak, and I think we should try to unravel some of what's going on here. So
This feels pretty confusing to me. So with our question, why did Jesus die for our sins? You know, or what does that mean? This is the dying bit, right? Like Jesus died here.
Yeah, so it's kind of, why did Jesus die for our sins? Probably telling the story of Jesus dying would be a key part of it, maybe.
one would think so. One would really think so.
It's a bit. Oh yeah, and you know what? To get this, we got to start out with just a big word that we don't use that often anymore. But the word is atonement.
Okay. Come
Yeah,
on,
I know,
Big
right?
Chief. Let's go, Big Chief. Like, hold fire here. Throw around your dictionary here with a big word.
Exactly. Well, yeah, it makes me sound and feel cool. So there we go. It's so
Whatever it
key.
takes.
Whatever it takes. I don't have much. It's like, oh my God. But so this bit about atonement is just a way that we can say that makes us right. So a big theme, again, through what we were talking about is this sin, right? And sin and the rebellion against God's ways that fractures relationship. Things are broken.
That's that gap, right? Like the gap between Jesus and God and us, right?
Yep. And it's gap. And again, we all feel that at certain levels when we know that we're not the way it should be, not the way it's supposed to be. And so when we live in that space, how do we bridge that? And so actually the word atonement in English, it kind of almost comes from at one mint is kind of how that. So how that was fractured it apart. How does it come back to be one? And this is that big problem that we're talking about, the rebellion that we have, the relationship that's broken. How is it mended? How is it fixed? And there was this a festival in Israel that we talked about, after the Exodus, there's Torah, which is, again, Hebrew for the way. What is the way to live that's fitting for what God has done? And again, this is that thing that we don't like being told what to do, so we don't do it. But then that fractures the relationship, and so how is it mended? How is it atoned? And in Israel, you have this in Leviticus 16. You have this story about this festival, this feast for the Day of Atonement. And how is all of Israel made right? And there's you see the priest, the high priest, goes and a very elaborate ceremony. The priest goes and there is a sacrifice, and then the blood of the sacrifice is sprinkled ceremonially
Wait,
and
wait. Hold on. Okay, so we're at a festival, right? A festival is a
we're at the
gathering.
concert.
The big concert.
We're at the big concert. And wait, hold on.
We're at the concert, and then some priest,
Some
some
guy comes along with shaggy
with
hair
blood.
and
Yeah,
he
and-
starts sprinkling.
stuff got real quickly.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah,
Chris Martin is on the stage sprinkling blood.
dude, I mean, and it's
Okay.
right. And that's that thing, like, you look, to feel how weird and how awful and how just like earthy and powerful this notion is.
Was it a rabbit? What was
It was not a rabbit. That so you have in the atonement would be bulls were sacrificed, something, you know,
Like,
and
like-
yep.
Isn't that a team you support or something?
No, the Bills.
Oh, the Bills.
The Bills.
Oh, the Bill. Yeah, there we go. So they're close, very close. So one of the things that you have in all of this in Torah is this notion of how sacrifice, and specifically they'll use the language of the scriptures is how blood is, there's something really significant in that, and that blood somehow cleanses and again atones for, and that's really, man, that's a complex and a tough dynamic for us sometimes.
And I feel
And
like that's a really big thing that we could pick up on a later date. Like,
Yeah, it's
exactly
probably
what that
something- I mean-
means.
Basically, killing an animal helps us be at one with God. Right.
Well, if you want to be careful, right? Like, it's not any animal. You can't just go out and whack a couple of squirrels and think, woohoo, you know.
Yeah, we don't. No killing after this. No
There's
killing.
No animals
No
were harmed
animal
in the
killing.
making of this.
Yeah. But I think that you're right, man. This is one of those things that is rightly so really disturbing. And we just can't unpack that right now. So we just got to set it to the side. And hopefully it doesn't sit well with all of us. But that there is somehow the shedding of blood, and innocent blood, is somehow part of this dynamic by which humanity becomes in right relationship with God. It points to the fallenness and the brokenness of the world that we live in, that somehow this would be part of that. And we all sit like, oh, that's awful. Yes, it's awful. The world is broken. And so kind of back into this story, you've got this Day of Atonement is this massive thing. And then you also have right on this, remember we were talking about Passover.
Right.
And that part of Passover is the sacrifice of a lamb. And the sacrifice, and there's a pure lamb without blemish is the language, you know, spotless. Something you don't bring out the mangy guy with dags all over his butt, and you know, there you go, it's your best one.
Okay, would this play into why we as New Zealanders love to eat lamb at Easter?
Sure. What I've learned is that you, as sensible New Zealanders, just like to eat lamb all the time because it's awesome.
We love lamb.
But you sure? We'll say that's a dynamic I'm not too sure about, but it could fit.
Do you eat lamb at Easter?
I eat lamb all the time.
Oh,
See,
yeah.
because you're a sensible person.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Kiwi.
Keep
Kiwi
going.
So again, when we hear the story of Jesus, and we hear the story of Good Friday, and it's really rough. There are so many layers of imagery that are all at work here. What we have is this atoning sacrifice. And if we had more time, we could go into the timeline that Matthew gives in his account, and what happens at the 9th hour, what happens at the 12th hour, at the 3rd hour, and how that parallels to his various sacrifices that are being performed for Passover, even as this is all going on. And that there's hints that Matthew is trying to, just in the way he tells the story, point us to, hint at what Jesus is doing as a sacrifice that atones for all. And then you see also in the story of Jesus getting a crown of thorns, a scepter, being robed as a king, because you have the high priest was the one who gave that atoning sacrifice. You have the king the Lord of all creation. But again, what we were talking about before, right? It's not the king that we expected. It's not the servanthood that we expected, the liberation that we expected. This is a story that's going wrong at every stage.
So
And
Jesus is what you're saying here is Jesus is that lamb, right? That pure lamb. That's why we talk about him with no sin, right? Because then he's that lamb that makes things right with God, brings us back from that chasm together.
You talked of the imagery before. I think, is that what we're saying? Like how that imagery is happening there?
Well, there was that festival, right? That he was talking about, that concert where Chris Martin's sprinkling blood. And we got that one, and at that festival, the pure lamb was sacrificed, right? Or am I mixing it up? Am I getting
a little bit, but I mean, they're weaving in and out. So one of the sure ways, if we look at the New Testament writers and how they reflect on this, we see in the book of Romans, in the book of Hebrews, and in the book of Revelation. So in Romans, because we talked about the significance of Jesus being sinless. And there's this, if you grew up in the church like I did, going to Sunday school, you may have heard this phrase that the wages of sin is death. And that...
Okay. So, hold on. Sin being rebellion.
We're a bit slow here.
Wages being things that you get, like people earn wages.
Yeah. You get what you deserve in that sense of a wage.
So when we choose our way instead of God's way,
you get what you deserve.
You get death.
You get death. And that's the key thing that's pronounced way back in Genesis 3, when the rupture happens, Jesus, not Jesus, but the pronunciation, that's a dumb word. What God says to Adam and Eve in the story is various forms of death. Mm. And the fracturing, and the death. And so only someone, and so if you haven't sinned, you don't have to pay that wage. And that's a big one. So if the wage of sin, consequence is death, but you've not sinned, then you don't have to die. But you can choose to die.
Whoa.
And so, right, eh? Come on. So he can choose to die, empty himself for, and innocent blood then gets shed, which is then a key aspect of this notion of the process of atonement. And you see that in the author of the book of Hebrews is this long kind of extended conversation of like the author kind of like going, whoa, how do we make sense of this stuff? And that author then weaves in these notions of sacrifice and sinlessness and self-offering to help us kind of get a sense of what's going on, what happened on Good Friday. And then the language of Revelation, and again, this metaphor that John uses throughout Revelation. I think like Revelation 5 especially, is you've got this language of worthy is the Lamb. This metaphor when Revelation talks of Jesus, the Lamb who was slaughtered for us, who still bears the metaphorical language of the stripes or the wounds, still carries the wounds. And so all this imagery that the New Testament writers use to help make sense of what happens in Jesus's death is all language of atonement, all language that brings us back to what God's doing in Israel after being brought out of Egypt, in the ways by which our relationships are brought back together and things are made right again. Now,
Okay. Pause there.
Wow.
Like, if your kid is not like exploding right now, then you're just maybe way better than we are. Because,
well, the king of the world, right? The king of the world chose to die.
Didn't have sin.
Didn't have sin. So was that clean lamb, and chose to die for other people. Like, puts their life on the line, even though they didn't have to, and says, I'm doing this for you.
Okay, so my brain goes to, what about the people? Like, what about the people who we're on this journey. Palm Sunday, people, we've got the crew hanging out, having dinner, towel, wash his feet. We're now blood of the lamb, and we're talking about Chris Martin sprinkling, things at a concert. What about the people?
Oh man, like this is exactly it, right? So we get into this story about Jesus being betrayed, about going in and being held by the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the religious establishment, who are trying to protect Israel from Rome, and they're trying to save the political peace. And so what they do is the people have all of a sudden turned against Jesus because it becomes apparent that he's not going to deliver what they thought he ought to.
So they've clued it. They've kind of gone.
They've kind of figured it out.
They've gone. This is not what we signed up for.
This is not what we signed up for. And if we can get this right, the sense that because we often think that Jesus came to give us a cush life, that Jesus came to make my problems go away. And then the thing is that you walk with Jesus long enough, you are going to find out that the problems don't go away. And in fact, you're not given a cushy existence. You're given a cross.
Yeah.
And you are given this, we live to pour ourselves out because the slaves aren't better than the master. We pour ourselves out for people we don't know so that they would know that God has made things right for them, has bridged that gap for them. Now, okay, so here's a detail of the story that are you ready? This one's going to blow your mind as well.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I can cope with much more. Come on.
All right,
Okay.
so there's this great little detail in the telling where after Jesus dies, they said that there's earthquake. This is like earthquake. The sun goes dark, and then say, and in the temple, the curtain between the most holy place and the place where the other schmoes got to go, that there's a curtain there, and that's a really important thing. That's God's home in behind the curtain, and you're not allowed to go in there.
Who's allowed in there?
I think only the high priest is allowed in.
Only the high
So,
priest,
yeah.
and only on the Day of Atonement, which we've been talking about, right? Come on,
Okay.
it gets cooler. So only the high priest gets to go in there, only on the Day of Atonement. And then after Jesus dies, it says the curtain is torn in two, but it's torn top to bottom. Now, any human who goes in there would, if they were to tear it, they would tear it bottom to top, because this thing's massive, bro. It's way up there. So only
Like
God
3,
tears
4,
Like, what are we
5
talking? Like
meters.
2 guy Bentons? Like,
it. Yeah, with 5 Bentons high.
I don't think the world could handle that. That'd be too much.
hey.
That would be it's 5 Bentons equals 2 McGarrys. It's
Oh. And a Spence, just for good measure. But hey,
so you have this
top
So
to bottom.
Top to bottom.
top to bottom. So God rips, God separates, and so this very real sense that the God who is there for the people of Israel, who Israel could atone by going through the Day of Atonement ceremonies, and that was all of Israel being right with God. But what about everybody else? What about the people all over the world? It's torn top to bottom, and this place where God was is now everywhere for all people. And this atonement isn't just for Israel's sin, isn't just for Israel's rebellion against the way, but it's a signal that what's going on in this is for all creation, is for all people. That this is God, it's bigger, it's new, it's different, it's more.
And so for the people that are there, Jesus is dying on Good Friday, and this happens, but this is they're just there. This is live action. They're not having
This is live action. And so what you're seeing is everything going on, and people aren't quite, it's happening too fast. It's happening so quick. You don't really know what's going on. You don't know, and you're trying to make sense of everything that's going on with that. They don't know And so you've got these stories about the Mary at the cross and Jesus consoling them, and it's just higgledy-piggledy everywhere.
And so basically, you don't have to be Jewish any longer to get this promise of God. And everyone's sitting there thinking, this isn't how it was supposed to go, right? Like this.
Yep. So you. Sorry, guys. I got my guys are. Sorry, I got to talk later. We'll get you later.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.